Hey, what's up, everyone? Mixing it up this week and going to do a video blog in lieu of writing a piece. This Saturday will mark 4 months since my brother passed away, so I wanted to do an update on the role of psychedelics, in the grieving process. And I think you can't have that conversation without at first kind of framing, why I think psychedelics, are a very healthy avenue and channel for select individuals to explore when they're dealing with a tragedy. Um, and I think that starts by kind of debunking just uh, some misconceptions and false associations that come with psychedelics. Labels are incredibly powerful, and most people, if you did like one of those tests where psychedelic is, they would say drug, and that's going to inform their worldview, just to kind of validate the destructive, but also incredibly effective power of labels. They did one study in the 2016 primaries that every time Trump would give one of those like nicknames, that he did to like Rubio and all the other, and Jeb Bush and all the other people on the trail, within 2 weeks of him assigning a nickname to his competition, the person would drop out of the race because it psychologically was such an effective strategy. Confirmation bias. Then anytime the person, if their nickname is lying, whatever, then anytime they say something that's like a half truth, it's like, oh, Trump was right, they're a liar. And this happens with psychedelics, where broadly speaking, outside of the echo chamber that I habitate, there's this thing with drugs, and I think a lot of the consensus is like, well, why do you need drugs? So let's just fucking dive into that nonsense. One, a lot of people, unfortunately, when grieving a loss, they numb with alcohol. That's a very common one. Instead of a two drink person, they become a three, or a no drink person becomes a one or two drink person. That helps them navigate. Alcohol, by definition, on every physiological interpretation of what it does, is a numbing agent. It masks the pain. It suppresses the pain beneath the waterline of consciousness. But it is an incredibly ephemeral and highly unhealthy modality of healing. And in my experience, since I once embarked on that path, you're just kicking the can down the road, but the can gets bigger and bigger every time you do it, and you're asking for a complete breakdown at some inevitable future when the numbing doesn't wear off, or you'll just drink until that doesn't happen, which is going to have invite a whole host of other not so favorable issues into your ecosystem. The other thing I would say is I wouldn't underestimate people that, and I think they do this in their lives generally, but also certainly when they're grieving, this notion of being constantly busy. We've all met people at work or parties or whatever that you ask them what their weekend was, and it's like, when did you come up for air? Oh, I hiked, then I had coffee, then I walked my dog, then I did this, then I was at Soul Cycle, then yoga, then and they are. It becomes, to anyone that's kind of awake, it becomes abundantly clear this person is afraid of being in their own thoughts, that they've calendared out a life where they are so busy, every hour is filled electively. We all have responsibilities, to the point where they can avoid being in their own thoughts and feeling and going into the pain and processing and doing all the shadow work necessary to ultimately hopefully heal one day. Psychedelics are antithetical to both of those modalities. They don't numb. They don't numb at all. They are unequivocally a healing agent, and they make you feel. And these feelings can be highly uncomfortable. They're not always a good time. I started to get kind of specific on what I've been doing. I went down to Mexico and spent some time there and did a samadhi journey, and that was incredibly intense. And I wouldn't recommend that as a healing modality for like a psychedelic neophyte, but for those that are experienced in the other realm, I found it to be one of the most intense psychedelic experiences of my life, if not the most intense. As I wrote about in that piece, which you can find on the blog, if you're new to this, uh, it took me to a consciousness where it felt pretty convincingly that I was, with my brother in his final moments. We know for a fact now scientifically that consciousness does not end when the heart stops beating. It goes on for a few minutes. I've also written about that, and my strong conviction here is that dying is tantamount to a psychedelic experience. There's probably the sacred geometry and the imagery that so many report. Upon seeing when they've had mystical experiences, when they've truly transcended and seen God. So that was a powerfully cathartic experience. But it was also just one big event to kind of come to grips with what happened. I subsequently started a microdose of psilocybin around Thanksgiving, so a month and a half ago. Uh, and for those that don't know, microdosing is just taking a small amount of psilocybin, usually daily. The typical cadence is 6 days on, 2 days off. Um, I don't ever recommend anyone doing a microdose for like in perpetuity. Some do, but we don't have long term studies. If it is, even on a minuscule level, jacking up serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, we don't know what the long term effects of doing that. I mean, it's plausible to assume it might be analogous to steroids, where doing a cycle here and there probably isn't the worst thing. But if you chronically are augmenting your body's natural testosterone, right? Like then it's going to increase estrogen. It could have all these side effects downstream. It might be similar with microdosing, where making you more happy and creative, without taking breaks, might not be the best idea long term. We don't know due to the legality and lack of studies here. But I usually don't never do a microdose for more than 3 months, so I'll continue till about March or end of February and wrap it up. But what that has catalyzed is the most intense dreams that I've ever experienced. My brother's in my dreams every single night, when having these very deep conversations. And I don't know if this is, signals from the universe. It's clearly something I need to, explore and investigate, but it's very, very interesting and hard. You wake up feeling incredibly sad when the realization comes that, that wasn't waking reality. That was a different reality. And I have no doubt that at least in part, the attribution of that, certainly the consistency of which, we're not talking about a dream here and there, but almost every single solitary night would be the mushrooms. And this is kicking things up and forcing me to feel, which I think just drives home the point that psychedelics aren't a way to numb and mask. People do that without drugs in a much more effective manner, but actually go in and feel the shit and feel the pain and deal with that. It's really hard. Another learning I'd have over the last few months, I think, in just terms of the comfort, and I wrote about this and how to help people grieve. One of the comforts of modernity, and most losses are usually a grandparent that had a full life, and there's not as much unexpected death, at least in the West, and people are just uniquely unqualified to deal with others that are grieving. They just don't know, and 99% of people are obviously well intended, and you see that with something that's called topping, where their immediate reaction is to then share, when they hear about your loss, to share their own loss. That's usually a false equivalency and just not relevant or empathetic, but just they don't know what else to do. The other thing you experience is a whole bunch of outreach in the initial days, weeks, and then radio silence. People are busy; they go back to their lives. I think I'm going to make a point going forward when a loved one does lose someone, to the 2 month later, 3 month later phone call, 4 month later, 5 month, that goes a long way, because at that juncture you can rationally assume that a lot of the outreach has stopped, but the pain is still very visceral. You're still very much in shock mode. And yeah, and so that's a good time to reach out to someone that's grieving. Like you'd be surprised how well that would be received several months after the fact, because it's still very, top of mind. So yeah, so the microdose has been helpful. I think it's actually catalyzed a lot more, emotional breakdowns and sadness. But every time that happens, I think it's progress, because it's my old therapist had a great quote, better out than in, and keeping these things in, there's all great books written about this. The body keeps score, the myth of normal. We store things somatically. Every thought, every emotion that we carry gets stored in the cells of the body. And, that's not inconsequential. So I think working through this stuff, and with the helpful, catalyst that is psilocybin in small doses daily, is helping me, get through this process. That leads me to the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is this notion of like spiritual bypassing. So there's two different ways that people attack psychedelics as a healing modality. One is, oh, it's a drug and you're masking and you're just doing drugs and getting high to forget and hallucinating. And that's a bunch of fucking bullshit from people that just don't know what they're talking about. And then the other one is, I think, a little bit more, has a more, validity to it, which is this notion of spiritual bypassing, which is like meditating and healing and having mystical experiences your way through a tough time. And so I think it's important that I remain cognizant that I don't fall susceptible to that trap, because it's something that I could easily do, but I don't. I'm doing the same, breath works, meditations every single week that I've always done. I'm sitting with the pain when I feel it. I'm not, loading up my calendar just to be busy and to avoid it. And hopefully this process and sharing it in this venue can help people when they inevitably deal with loss, because it's one thing that we will all ultimately encounter. So been an incredibly hard 4 months, arguably the hardest of my life. But psychedelics have played a very positive, constructive role in dealing with these feelings, and doing the work, because the only way is through. So I'm going to end this week on actually something, a woman that's very close to me. I put on my glasses to read. I wanted to look cool in the snippet that goes out on Substack, so I neglected to put on my glasses initially. But so someone that's very close to me is brilliant thinker, writer, and she lost her father entirely too young, and wrote something and had shared it with me recently, and it's better than anything I could have written or come up with. So I'm just gonna steal her shit and read this to you all. It's I don't think I've ever read anything like, I had fucking goosebumps the first time I read this, and I read it like 4 times, and every time I was like, I don't think I've ever read anything from anyone ever that better articulated and shared like what it is to lose someone. So I'll read that and then that'll be it. All right. Loss doesn't just stop. There is no cure. There is no single answer or action that can bring you back to heaven or to seeing the earth as a playground. I've never wanted the simplicity of a bliss that washes over you without reason so badly. There are moments when you think for a second or a day this feels like happiness, and you convince yourself in the sidelines of your existence that you've beat it. I'm cured. Who knew all I needed was some sunshine and a hug? And as you drive down the PCH, not understanding how you could possibly live with any other feeling than gratitude, the page flips and the road is a blur, because for 2 seconds you thought, I wish I could tell my dad about this. And somehow it's raining inside your car, when in reality he probably wouldn't have picked up the phone if he was there. But you keep going, feeling like you're floating free-bodied on the surface of a foggy sea, hoping for a glimpse of sun, and humming into the gap between you and space, asking for anything beautiful to happen. The moral of the story is that when hope seems to be fleeting, there are two things that matter: art and kindness. Create as much passion in your own life and the lives around you. Sorry, 1 second. Let me reread that last part. Create as much passion in your own life and the lives around you as you can, because if I'm feeling this way, I can't imagine what's happening to the people existing around me. I thought that was incredibly beautiful. Wanted to share it with you all. One of the things that I've been doing, just because of the excruciating amount of pain that I've been in, is every time I go and interface with anyone out in the world, is just to bring as much joy as I can. Treating random people to a meal at a restaurant without knowing that who did it. So they have a story that then cascades down and reverberates through the universe in a positive way. Getting to know people, looking them in the eye, thanking them, asking them questions, doing all of that, apropos to this beautiful message that my friend wrote. Spreading love and joy and kindness into the universe when you're in the midst of a real struggle, is something, I don't know, there's something kind of fucking beautiful about that. So I'm going to keep doing it. And thanks for watching this, and I'll see you all soon.